because two of the names are a real mouthful, and one of the names is shorter. Myrna Swenson, Paul Miles Schneider, and Jonathan Shirshekan. I'm going to start with Myrna because she's sitting close enough to me to let me have it tonight, and the Munchkins, oddly enough, had never been to New York City before to make an appearance. And when 5 chairs were put on the stage at Alice Tully Hall in New York, and I started to talk about the Munchkins, the temperature in the room went up about 50 degrees, and there was so much excitement. Everybody from Spike Lee to Lorna Luft in attendance, and the Munchkins absolutely brought down the house. One of them was Myrna's husband, Clarence, who had played a Munchkin soldier in The Wizard of Oz. And she has been a Munchkin by marriage. How many years were you and Clarence married, Myrna? Mic up, mic up.
80-something.
I'm sorry?
80-something.
You were married 80 years?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
You were, oh, well that would make you about 100 now.
Not quite.
Okay, well, you have just seen John Fricke totally nonplussed. Make a note of it because it's a historical first. I thought they got married in the 1940s, but I guess I was wrong. Anyway, the bottom line here is that you had almost worked with him in The Wizard of Oz yourself. And your father was, but your father was an entertainer in effect. Tell him what his most noteworthy role, the role they'll recognize him.
He was Buster number 3. Back in those days, they had little people dressed up like Buster Brown that traveled all over the U.S. and Canada. And he was Buster number 3.
And was your mother in show business as well? I don't remember.
No. The only thing we were in were state fairs.
State, okay. But you all 3 were invited, and you were underage at that point, but you were all 3 that were invited to be in The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, I was 13.
And what happened?
I ended up in the hospital with emergency appendectomy. There went my dreams.
Did you actually have dreams?
Uh-huh.
Oh, see? Another new highlight I didn't know about. You also, it wasn't just, in those days, an appendectomy wasn't as quickly dealt with as it is now.
I ended up in the hospital for about 2 or 3 weeks before I could go.
And then when you told them you were ready, MGM very graciously said,
sorry, we filled everything. So
it was, yeah, they were too far along to use you at that point. So we fade out on late 1938, and we fade up on, what, about 1941, 42, when you met Clarence outside the movie theater?
Something like that.
Okay. Clarence was coming out of the theater, and you were walking down the street in Austin with your folks.
Mm-hmm. I was a high school senior, and I had been to a tea at my high school, and I was all dressed up. And he came out of the theater and saw my parents, and he started talking to them. And they were standing in front of me, I was right behind them. And he was talking to them, but he kept looking at me all the time. He was working in San Antonio at the time, and he came back to Austin every weekend after that.
And how long did it take after that for you to... Were you as interested in him as he was in you, or what? How did you think of that? What did you feel?
Well, I was still in high school, and we went together 4 years because I wanted to finish high school first.
And so you got married, and you got 3 daughters.
3 daughters, 5 grandkids, and 9 great-grandkids.
Congratulations. As you can tell from Myrna's charming accent, she's from County Cork in Ireland, and so all right, you and Clarence had your family, and Clarence was doing what kind of work? He was in engineering, wasn't he?
Electrical engineer is what his title was.
And you basically stayed in the Austin. Were you in Pflugerville all that time?
No, we lived in Austin at that time. He worked at the University of Texas Research Department.
Excellent. And when Oz started to show up on TV, were your kids aware that their father was in the movie, or their children?
Yeah, we told them, there's Daddy. There's Eddie.
And if you watch the film, Clarence, as I recall, is in the fourth row of the soldiers, the one nearest the camera. Is that right?
Fourth row back.
Okay. When did all of the Oz revival, when did you and Clarence start to be invited to things? I know for a lot of little people it started in 1989 with the 50th anniversary.
I don't remember the exact year. He went to the first one by himself because my mother was very ill, and I had to stay home and take care of her, so I didn't get to go.
How did Clarence feel about all this late life notoriety? He was retired by that point, wasn't he? So that he was kind of free to come and go at the festivals?
Retired shortly after that. But it was just a job. He considered it a job. That was it.
But he really participated wholeheartedly. He had a costume made, and
Yeah. They talked him into getting a costume made so he would look more like.
Who did the talking into? Who talked him into that?
Several people tried to.
I would assume Margaret Pellegrini.
Yeah. Yes, Margaret had a lot to do with it.
Because Margaret was one of the first. Margaret and Fern Formica were two of the first little people who came here to Chittenango long before the 50th anniversary. And Meinhard Robbie, I believe, was the first, and he brought in them, and then they brought in the others, including me, actually, and I was taller. But I think, now you did all of that traveling with Clarence for the better part of 20 years, to festivals and cruises and the Munchkin getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. What do you think meant the most to him of all of those 20 years in terms of Oz, and what meant the most to you? Was there any events that particularly stood out?
No. He just loved the people, everybody, and he liked to go to all of them. Talk to anybody. I used to say he could talk to a telephone pole. But I was afraid it might answer him back. I'd be in trouble.
He was, too, as I recall, a great hugger. And the people who followed the Munchkins around used to love coming up to Clarence because his arms would go up automatically, instinctively.
Yeah. He loved the people, he loved traveling, and he loved to talk.
Well, we are going to wrap up tonight with the end of a documentary from 20 years ago about the Munchkins, and you will see Clarence and you will hear him talking some of his memories and about his reactions to the public. So we will come back to Myrna and Clarence at that point in our evening. But to speak to somebody who, Munchkin by marriage and an almost Munchkin in the movie, and who's still willing to come out and share this kind of stuff, on behalf of everybody here, we're very grateful. Myrna, good for you. When The Wizard of Oz was launched in test screenings in Appleton, Oconomowoc, and Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Cape Cod, Massachusetts, they showed it there a few days before they even premiered it in Hollywood, because those were resort communities and family lake vacation communities, and they wanted to see how Oz was going to play. It was too late for them to really do anything with the picture, but I think they wanted to make sure the ad campaign was effectively selling the picture, which indeed it did. But to launch the film in New York in the grandest possible way, MGM decided that there would be... Is it all right if I talk about the stage show and then you talk about the... Okay. MGM decided that the best thing to do would be bring a live stage show back to the Capitol Theater on the corner of 51st and Broadway with The Wizard of Oz. So that for 15 cents if you were a kid and 25 cents if you were an adult, you got to see The Wizard of Oz first run in a 4,500-seat huge movie palace. Then you got a cartoon, you got a travelogue, you got previews of coming attractions, and then the curtain went up on a 20-piece live orchestra, a backup quartet of 4 singers, and Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland came out live and did a 33-minute song and dance act, 5 times a day, 7 times a day on weekends. But this created a sensation, the likes of which New York had not seen since Lindbergh came back. And Jonathan Shirshekan is somebody, Jonathan Shirshekan, if you've been in the Oz Club for any length of time and you have made yourself available as a correspondent, you might have gotten an email from somebody you thought was a 40-year-old college professor, and as you exchange what snail mail letters are now email letters with that 40-year-old college professor, you find out he's really 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and just one of those people who can write. This is this one. About 10 years ago, I got my first email from Jonathan, and beautifully written letter with questions about Oz and Judy, and we started to correspond. And then I found out that he was, in best Judy Garland parlance, a fetus. And, but in spite of that, we stayed friends. And in 2009, I was just lucky that he was willing to work with me on the 70th anniversary Oz book that Barnes & Noble published in 2009. That's another whole saga that we'll get into sometime when you want to hear sob stories about publishing. But the book turned out to be something we're proud of. One of the things Jonathan has accessed in his collecting, and his indeed are the Judy Garland costumes that are on display at All Things Oz this weekend, and if you haven't been up there, you should see costumes from Easter Parade and Star is Born and Summer Stock. But one of the things he collected very early on was something he's going to talk about now because it applies to that special launch of The Wizard of Oz in New York. They want you to use this mic, if you will, John. It's more reliable.
So, oh my goodness. So, back when I was 16, I was on eBay before eBay was a thing, and I came across this book that was listed, I think, as Judy Garland's scrapbook from something she may have did in 1939, and they really didn't have any idea what it was, and neither did I, but I bid on it anyway. And it turned out to be Judy's scrapbook that was assembled for her for when she and Mickey did the East Coast publicity tour for The Wizard of Oz. It originally came, and this is what I'm presenting some material from it. It originally came from her estate sale. So Judy's third husband sold some of Judy's remaining items in 1978. And there were actually two scrapbooks in there covering her work on The Wizard of Oz. One focusing mainly more on the production, which I've never seen since then, and then this one. And the MGM was extremely humble when they created this scrapbook for her, and they titled it for her as Judy Garland Takes New York, followed by, how am I going to have you click?
You just tell me,
Click.
Okay guys, so it's Sunday and we're heading home. We decided not to go to the festival today. We want to get Rosa home and comfortable. She's snuggling up with Winnie the Pooh right now. Hopefully she'll sleep for most of the ride like she did on the way here. Did you have a good time at your first Oz-Stravaganza? Yeah? Did you? Now, next year is going to be a big year because it's the 30th anniversary of Return to Oz as well as the 40th anniversary of The Wiz. So I have a feeling next year's going to be lots of fun. Hopefully we'll be able to come, but it looks like my sister's wedding is going to be the same weekend. So might not be in the cards for next year, but we'll see. We had such an amazing time, and when we get home we'll film our haul video of all the things that we bought while we were here. And yeah, any last words, Papa?
Homeward bound!
Homeward bound!